There's 4 key moments in our days as well where we can provide that connection for our kids and communicate value, purpose, and culture to them. The first one is when you sit at home. Now, I don't know about your house, but usually the only time we sit is at dinner time. Right? Everything is going on, and you finally get to sit down. And, we really encourage people to take time to have meals together as a family. And make sure that you turn these off, because they are a real distraction. I mean, there have been times when I've noticed that Faith and Sean, who's our youngest at home, and I are all sitting there looking at our phones, and that doesn't really promote good communication. So even moms and dads, make sure we've got our stuff off to the side, and find time to talk. And if you have trouble figuring out what kind of things to talk about, you can always go and find icebreakers online. You can get them for every age group, and they work really good for getting the conversation started. The second time is when you walk along the road. Now, not many of us walk lately, but we do drive. And driving is a great place to be with your kids, because they can't get out of the car once it's moving. And you have a captive audience. And we really have found that that's been a great time for us to connect with the kids. Most of our kids, we've actually had to drive to school. And that drive to school is actually wonderful, because that's a time when I usually get to pray with my kids. It's been a time where we have got to even talk about some of the things maybe they're anxious about during the day, and kind of talk through maybe some strategies as we're driving along the road. Another thing that I did with Sean when he was young, he was about 6 or 7, I strapped him in the back of the car and said, I'm driving, but you tell me where to go. And so he would tell me to turn left, to turn right, to go straight forward. And we had an adventure that day. It was great because he was in the driver's seat, but we got to talk as well, because it opened up that way for us to have a communication time together. And another time that's great for us is on road trips, right? Road trips are great, and most of the time they go okay, but even when we have those moments on road trips where things don't go okay, right? They have made for some great stories for our kids, and there's stuff that we can look back on and how we work together even to solve some of those problems. So those are great times for us to kind of connect.
Okay, the next one is when you lie down. And so that's bedtime, or maybe not bedtime. When your kids are little, it's a perfect time to just connect with them and talk to them about any anxious thoughts they might have about tomorrow, or anything that happened today, or read them a story, or pray with them. We always prayed with our kids and read them a story to tuck them in. And when your kids are teenagers, you can't always... you can't usually tuck them in. I was just thinking about Tim and Jen, but anyways, we don't tuck our 17-year-old child in. But when our kids were teenagers, sometimes there were inconvenient times to connect with them, and sometimes we were ready for bed.
Yeah.
And we were just going to bed, and somebody would plop down on the couch and say, so let me tell you about my day. And we're like really tired, and we were ready to go to bed, but okay, tell me about your day. And we lean in, because you know what? You need to take those times. You need to take those sacrifices, because there's treasures in them, and they will remember the times that you stayed up late. They will remember the times that you were up all night with your kids, talking to them or talking through things. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the opposite end is when you get up in the morning. And I love mornings. I'm a morning person, and I love the sun coming up, watching that. And I think each day is a brand new day, and it's a great time to just kind of reset everything. And it's a great time also to just kind of set the mood for your kids in the morning, and set that positive set of mind for them for the day. You have to be also careful of each child's different routine, especially as you get to kids who are teenagers, because you can't just waltz into the room, flick open the curtain and go, "Good morning, sunshine," right? That doesn't really go over well with your teenagers. In fact, in Proverbs, it talks about this. It says in Proverbs 27:14, if anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. And can I tell you, I'm sure that there were mornings that my children thought it was a curse. But we want to be careful with that and be sensitive of that. Sometimes it's just good to say, "Hey, there's coffee downstairs," and close the door quietly behind you. So those are some times where you can actually connect with your kids. But what are some guidelines for connecting and communicating with our kids, and how we're gonna do that? So we'll talk a bit about those.
The first one is learning to listen. And there are all kinds of times in the day when you may not see it, but look for those opportunities to listen. I know I talked a little bit about that in my last point. When you listen to your kids, show genuine interest. Put down your phone. You don't need to be on your phone. You don't even have the phone in your hand. Show genuine interest. Don't judge. Don't say, "Oh, you did that." Don't be judgy. Be interested in what they're saying. Be kind, be genuine, be generous with your time. And I remember when my son was a teenager and he was talking to me, and I leaned in and he said, "I don't need your counselor hat right now. I need your mom hat." And I'm like, "Ooh, what do I do differently?" But sometimes our kids don't need our suggestions. They don't need our solutions. They don't need for us to talk at all. They need for us to listen to what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. And when you're listening, I think you also need to have your heart sensitive to what's also going on behind the scenes. So look for the questions that are behind the questions they're asking. Look for the concern that's behind the content that they're sharing with you, because they can be expressed to you in different ways, and even at different ages they're going to be expressed in different ways. And sometimes all of us have trouble sometimes getting down to the real root of things, and sometimes we'll talk about other things until we get to the point. And one of the things is I found that there are 7 what I call heart questions that go out for people, and that we all deal with at different times in our lives in different ways, but they're really important for us to look at. The first one is, am I safe? And if we're in a place of danger, we're not going to be wanting to talk about anything except for getting into that safe place, and we want to make a safe place for our kids. Am I secure? In other words, are my basic needs taken care of? Sometimes you can have a better conversation with a child with a sandwich in their hand than you can with them starving and waiting for you to get to the point. Also, am I loved? Are we showing our children that they're valued? Am I wanted? And that's not just for us as parents, but actually in their own community. Sometimes in their friend group, they're going to feel, maybe I'm not wanted in there, and maybe they're going to be talking to you, and that's really what's going on behind things. And when we get to that point is where we can actually start to connect with them and help them work through that question. Am I successful? Am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? Do I have a purpose? And one of the things I think is a lot of times we want to jump right to the purpose question when we haven't dealt with some of the other questions. And some of those questions need to be dealt with first before we get to purpose. And if we are dealing with those other questions first, when we get to purpose, it goes a lot smoother and a lot nicer for them.